I'm just going to introduce who's with me on stage today. I've got Luke with me and Barry, who is probably better known as Euro Buddha to everybody. So, yeah, Barry, could you just quickly introduce yourself for those that are new to Minima and maybe also share how you got that name?
Sure thing, Naomi. Thanks for that lovely introduction. My name's Barry, aka Euro Buddha. I've been with Minima since almost the beginning. Been in many different departments. A lot of you probably know me from support. If you had any problems setting yourself up, you've probably dealt with me. And as for the name Euro Buddha, my background was traditional banking. I used to trade euros. FRAs and short swaps, and I also sit comfortably in a full lotus, hence Euro Buddha.
All right, great. Moving on to Luke. I think we don't have to ask you where your name comes from because I assume it's your parents. But if
I
you
was
could
listening.
just
Yeah, my name's Luke, aka Luke. I can't sit in a full lotus. I'm not that flexible. So hats off to Barry there. I'm the head of community here at Minima, and yeah, you'll see me on various channels talking about various things. And my main role is helping to grow both the channels and the node count, and putting out some of the big initiatives that you've already started to see this month, and I'm sure we'll talk about later.
Yes, we will. And for me, I'm Naomi, and I'm the social media manager and also responsible for moderating and hosting these calls that are always one of my highlights. And yeah, so let's get into it um, because we've been up to a lot as well, which wasn't always obvious from the outside. So, um, yeah, what have you been working on this month, and what can you share with the community? Let's start with you, Luke.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose the biggest change that people will already be aware of, no doubt, is the invite program that is now live. We launched that, soft launched that last week, and this is where you can log into your incentive rewards account, access an invite code, which you can then give to friends and contacts. When they use that code to register, you will then get some extra minima each day that they run their node. Um, excuse me. And in a further development on that, I'm happy to say that today we've improved the UX on that program, thanks to feedback from all you lovely people in the community. And you'll now find that when you log into that program and click the share button, you'll actually copy a full URL, which if you just paste that link to people, when they click it, it will automatically take them to the registration page and pre-populate that invite code. So making it much easier for them. And on top of that, I've also been working on the ambassador program, which is the eagle-eyed of you will already seen some of the structural changes within the Discord server around that. And the full details should be coming before the end of the week.
All right. And on your side, Barry, is there anything you've been working on in particular last month that
Uh,
you would like to share?
I mean, support has been a little bit busier as we've rolled out the new APK as well, and a few of you have needed a little bit of assistance there. I've also been working hard in the background on the commercial side, promoting Minima and getting us ready for our exchange launch at the end of the year.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. What is your general impression when you talk to people, maybe on the commercial side as well, or what is their, yeah, first reaction when they hear from Minima?
I think it's probably common with many people in the crypto world. When they first hear what we're trying to do and what we're in fact doing, they tend to not believe us. Once they dig a little bit deeper and realise that we actually are doing it and have a working testnet and a working blockchain, we win them over and they start believing as well.
That's probably always the best way, right? Just showing people that actually there is this thing and it's working and it's growing. And also thanks to everybody who's here with us on the call. Um, yeah, speaking of things happening, are there any interesting things you've observed in the crypto industry this month? Maybe let's start with Luke as well.
Yeah, I have. It's interesting to see the further march, I suppose, of sort of traditional finance companies and businesses in general into the world of crypto, NFTs in particular. I saw the New York Stock Exchange have entered the metaverse and they filed a trademark for trading NFTs. It'll be interesting to see what that ends up being. I think a lot of people have heard of Decentraland as well. That's what JP Morgan Chase. That's something that they've put out. and we're already seeing brands jumping into that. So that's all very interesting to see the more traditional side of stuff really starting to jump into crypto.
Yeah, I've seen they also had a tiger in their lobby, so maybe that's something they're testing in the metaverse for the future. And you, Barry?
I mean, I think what I've noticed is not necessarily this month, but certainly over the past few months, is that decentralisation and the conversations around decentralisation are becoming more and more important. I think, with all the censorship that's going on, people are starting to realise the importance of decentralisation and the censorship resistance that comes with that. And as more and more regulation is coming into the space, I think a lot of these chains that are decentralised in name only are going to come under the hammer. Obviously, we're going to comply with all regulations as well, but true decentralisation means true censorship resistance, and that speaks to the Minima narrative in a big way.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I mean, we've seen it already last year when AWS went down and it took with it some decentralized exchanges where everybody started questioning how decentralized are these things truly. So I think those developments are just, yeah, continuing. Yeah, from my side, just one small thing because people have been asking about merchandise. So we now do have a merch store, and I'm going to share the link soon. So then you can run your note in style and, yeah, show everybody that you are a minimalist. And with that being said, we are also very grateful for all the amazing community members we have. And one of them really stood out this month because he has been helping everybody on Telegram to get set up with their nodes. And whenever they had issues, yeah, help them to get support. And that is Michael, who is also known as Bearable. If you've been in our Telegram, you might have interacted with him. So, congratulations to our community member of the month. Hi, Michael.
You're muted, Michael.
Sorry, hello, is that better?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
now you're
sorry.
live. Great. Hi, Michael. Congratulations and thanks a lot for really helping so many people on Telegram. Yeah, just guide them to
No
our
worries.
support where Barry then took care of them. Could you just maybe quickly introduce yourself and tell us, yeah, what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Michael, I'm from the UK. I first came across Minima possibly 6 months ago, randomly on Twitter, I think, and I sort of went through my list of people I was following, and I looked back and saw Minima and had a proper look into it, and sort of from there on, really, that I've really became impressed with what you've got going on.
Yeah, thank you. So that speaks to me because I have to manage Twitter. Um, and also, it's good to see that sometimes the efforts are paying off. Um, yeah, so have you been involved in crypto or blockchain looking into these things before, or was Minima the first touch point?
Yeah, so I believe it was March 2017 was when I first got had a Bitcoin transaction sent to me, and from then on I've spent most of my time involved researching, looking into different projects, and over the coming years then I sort of got attached to projects a bit too much, believed they were going to do what they were set out to do, and it was just constant disappointment really. So from then on, I more or less just looked into trading at the time, and then I've come across Minima, and I've gone back to that attachment side of things, really believing in a project. So sort of gone around in circles, but yeah,
No pressure there then, Michael.
yeah, I'm really believing what Minima are looking to set out to do. To be honest with you, and it's been a while since I've sort of had that feeling towards any project.
Yeah, so maybe could you tell a bit more about what you've been looking at when you were researching these projects? What were like the things you looked into?
More or less adoption at the time, and it's only been, so I'd say, sort of like the decentralized aspect of things has been more or less over the last year. That it started becoming more of an important subject, and Minima sort of fits all of that, adoption and decentralization. I think to see the adoption that we need. There's only one way, and that's sort of mobile native. So that's what kind of struck me, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, 80% of the world population have a phone, I believe. So it's definitely the way forward if you want to have everybody to run their own node. And how do you think Minima can add something, yeah, benefit you in your own life? Is there anything you would like to see built or what you would like to build yourself, maybe?
Yeah, so I think I was probably just a little bit, no, maybe I wasn't, but I believe I was a little bit too late for the sort of like the .com, and that happened. So now with decentralization, there's like with Minima comes possibilities to, like intellectual property.
Mhm.
That's one thing that can be built on Minima, sort of where you can offer that where it's not been possible in the past. Something like Minima will give us that opportunity to do so. So I'd like to think I'll come up with the idea of a decentralized app, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that will ever happen. But I'd like to believe I'll be able to come up with something at some point. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
think,
other than that, freedom really is the thing. Well, I deleted all my social media accounts a couple of years ago. I don't use Facebook. I don't, there's um I think that's a large, like, big part of it, to be honest with you. Like Google, the large corporations and everything. That's
yeah.
going forwards. I think the decentralization aspect of things will bring us into the future with like
Yeah,
a
maybe it's
lot more.
also different business models, right? Because at the moment, like all these big tech companies, their model is basically how some would put it, attention merchant, because all they
Mhm.
try is to suck out as much attention as possible. And they do that without you getting any benefit.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, so kudos to you that you managed to, yeah, leave all the social media platforms.
Apart from Twitter, but that's not. That's it, really. To be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad you kept Twitter, else we would not have had you here. So thanks for that. But I mean, personally, I hope that eventually we're going to have a decentralized alternative to Twitter, where maybe
Oh yeah,
then you just broadcast to your friends or maybe a bigger audience, whichever it might be. But yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining and for, yeah, congrats again for being our community member of the month and
Thank you
looking
very
forward
much.
to see what you come up with eventually when Minima is live and launched.
Yeah. All
And
right,
yeah,
thank you very much.
yeah, feel free to stay on or
I
move
think,
by.
Michael, you make a good point there when looking at different cryptos and deciding which ones to get involved with and which ones to follow. It's important that when you're investing or becoming a part of any community, you ask yourself, is this going to be useful for me? Am I going to be a customer for this endeavor? And that's what I'm most proud about in Minima is the whole community is participating. Everybody's running a node. Everyone understands what we're trying to do. Everyone can see a use case and how Minima will fit in their lives in the future. And it's quite awe inspiring.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, especially if you, let's say, would be like owning, let's imagine you would own your actual Twitter feed. As you
Hmm.
would, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot better than feeling like, okay, they could shut me down any second if I say some wrong thing. Um,
I mean, I think that's been very much the flavour of Web 2. Has been sort of large platforms, aggregating users and offering a service, but ultimately, the users have become the commodity. They're harvesting your data and they're selling that on, and you're bombarded with adverts left, right, and centre. What Minima does is give you the opportunity to be truly digitally self-sovereign, to be responsible for every aspect of your online life, control all your data, turn it on, turn it off, go where you please, relying on nobody at all, not even validators and block builders on the chain. Everyone on Minima is equal. Everyone does exactly the same thing as everyone else, and that's definitely going to be our strength.
yeah, Um, Maybe since we're already talking about advertising and attention, did you guys see the Super Bowl crypto ads? I mean, I
Yeah,
don't even watch Super Bowl, but I did see the ads. So
yeah, you're
what
right.
did you make of them?
I say not unusual. Not into football, American football myself, but I always watch the ads because they're always fun. They're always creative, and I always watch the halftime show. Um, and obviously this year it was very nostalgic, being was it West Coast rap, which is something I very much grew up with. Um, and I think looking at the ads myself, it was interesting to see the crypto ads specifically. Some of them were kind of what you would expect. It was kind of exchanges trying to put themselves in front of normal people, offer themselves as something as like an easy way into the crypto world for the average retail investor, or even just the person that's interested in trying something different to their standard savings account, perhaps. But I also saw some really cool sort of Web3 metaverse type stuff. We talked about Decentraland earlier on. We saw that I think it was Miller Lite had a bar that people could go visit within Decentraland where they were giving away some crypto. Also, I saw the one that actually interested me the most, going back into sort of the nostalgia thing, was Cryptodes created an unofficial Budweiser advert where they took the 1995 advert with the frogs, the toads, the Budweiser one, and sort of remixed it into Bud Vibes, and that appealed to me just because that was sort of the nostalgia thing, and I thought it was very clever. And it was interesting also to see how they were applying it in different ways to reach different people. I think it was Oculus, not Oculus, they call themselves something else now, but they'll always be Oculus to me. They actually put on a virtual gig with Foo Fighters, which you can access through in 3D through their goggles, or 2D if you didn't have them, but that was accessed through a QR code that appeared on screen during the Super Bowl. So it was very interesting to see how they were obviously a very big event within the US, lots of eyes on it,
Mhm.
lots of average, air quotes, average people watching it. And it was interesting to see the amount of money that was being spent to try and reach those people in quite novel ways.
Yeah, apparently Coinbase spent 10 million on their ad, and it was basically just a jumping QR code. Um, which, funny enough, then crashed their site. So because they had too many people looking at it at the same time. Yeah, Barry, what are your thoughts on using these kind of ads to get more people
Well,
into the
I
space?
think more awareness is always helpful. I do think right now it's a new frontier. Everyone's trying to grab their piece of real estate in the inverted commas metaverse. Be interesting to see how things play out. On the note of paying for advertising, Dr. Dre had to pay to produce that halftime show.
I sort of heard that. Apparently, they never play. Do they never play the artists? I suppose they see it as a pinnacle
Yeah,
type
yeah.
performance. But I enjoyed it. I did.
So that being said, do you remember the very first time you saw a crypto ad or something crypto related?
I remember the first time I ever heard about crypto. I was in the car listening to the radio, and it was when Bitcoin had just broken $1. And I
Oh,
remember hearing Bitcoin's trading $1, internet money. Sort of made a note to go home and look it up, and didn't do that for another 5 years.
what a shame. And you, Luke?
Yeah, do you know what? It was word of mouth. I just happened to be studying IT at the time. It kind of became not mainstream, just more known within sort of nerdy circles. And yeah, so my first sort of interaction online would have been Bitcoin Talk Forum. So it's going back a long way now. I think the first time I saw it in the wild being advertised was probably on the back of a bus. I think it might have even been crypto.com. There's suddenly kind of that awareness that this is no longer strictly nerdy. They're now spending a lot of money to put themselves in front of normal people, and this is going somewhere.
Yeah, I think for me it was actually in Tokyo because there's a lot of big crypto exchanges and they put their posters on the iconic Shibuya crossing. So I think that was the first time I saw like some model with a huge golden Bitcoin coin was advertising for DMF Bitcoin. Um, but yeah, and then I actually started working in crypto, so that's somewhat interesting. Um, so one of the big topics recently has been, unfortunately, hacks and scams. I mean, scams we've always seen in crypto, but hacks have been unraveling quite a lot recently, and we've also found out about who has been hacking in the past. Um, so have you ever been impacted by a hack or a scam, Luke?
Has anybody heard of a little exchange called MT Gox?
Oh dear.
That's Bitcoin history.
Oh
Yes.
yeah. So yes, I lost some Bitcoin when that went down, and even in the last week, still getting emails from the Japanese legal team representing people who have coins are trying to get back, moving that forward all these years later. And I think that for me at that point in time was the first time like a very large thing had impacted upon me directly. It taught me some lessons, that was for sure. But I had to sort of look after myself in the crypto world, and yeah, it's only gotten, if not as brazen, it's certainly gotten more wide scale. The more projects you get, the more tokens that pop up, the more that people get involved. Because where there's money, there's people trying to take it from you. I say.
Yeah, but I think it's quite, in the last 2 months, we have revealed the identity of two huge hackers, right?
Mm.
So first we have found out who hacked Bitfinex back in 2016, and then we found out who was actually behind the DAO hack in also 2016 or 15, like quite a couple years back. So it seems that it's really hard to hide your traces if you do hack and move crypto. How about you, Barry? Have you ever been impacted?
I've never been personally impacted by a hack. I mean, I've seen it happen to people around me, and have taken it on board and tightened up my own personal security. I think you start going down the crypto rabbit hole. It's kind of a steep learning curve, and I think it's important that you look after your own keys, you look after your own coins, but you take the correct precautions to protect those precious things. It's very easy to become complacent, to agree to certain things with your MetaMask on various random DeFi projects, and you don't really know what you're agreeing to. So you really do need to be careful out there.
Yeah, since you already mentioned it, what are you personally doing to stay safe when, let's say, you're interacting with DeFi or,
Well, I
yeah,
think I think
trading?
everybody who's got any holding should have a hardware wallet. There's various degrees of security on said hardware wallets, but I don't think you can ever be over secure. I think the clunkier and the more difficult it is to transact with a hardware wallet, the better. You don't want to make it easy, even for yourself, to do it. But it really is important. I also use security keys on my computer and my telephone. I've removed all telephone resets from all accounts because that is a very common SIM swap attack vector. Um, Two-factor authentication wherever you can. I think belt and braces plus another set of braces and maybe another belt is probably the minimum you need.
Yeah, or if you don't want to bother with 2FA, you can also use something like a YubiKey, where
Yeah,
you just
that's
plug
what
it
I use.
in,
I
so
use
it's
those.
like a
Yeah,
device.
yeah.
Yeah, and you don't use the Google tools. How about you, Luke? Anything you would add?
I couldn't agree with Barry more. And obviously, in my case, it wasn't people around me; it was me doing the science for my friends. It was me that was being the example to
Oh,
not fail in that case. And yeah, very much of a similar vein, really. That lesson taught me to take my security much more seriously. I think the one thing that it was implied there but not said directly was don't leave your assets on exchanges. Um, that's risky. If they go, if you leave your assets in their wallets and something happens to them, you might never get it back, or in my case, you might be waiting many, many, many years for even an understanding of what you may or may not get back. And that's if you're lucky. And yeah, it's making sure that you also have a division between your your normal online persona, perhaps the one that's tied in with your banking or your actual physical self in terms of your name, address, and things like that, and having a clear air gap between that and your accesses, accounts, and persona within the crypto world. Try and have two distinct identities essentially, so that if one is compromised, it does not affect you in the real world. That's something that I practice, and like Barry said, hardware wallets, or um, even potentially looking at doing cold storage if something you want to do long term, and if you want to hold it completely air gapped away, which is a whole other layer of paranoia, but it exists if that's something you want to do.
I mean, I think another thing to remember is it's not always the external forces that work against you. I mean, I know so many people who've lost their passwords, lost their seed phrase, lost their coins because of their own inability to manage their own information. So I think it starts internally, and then you worry about the external factors.
So true, so very true. The weakest link in any system, secure or otherwise, is and it's very easy for people's individuals to overestimate their own ability to remember things. Yeah,
Yes.
especially.
I mean, also, it's not so easy to remember like a 24 or word seed phrase that is pretty much random words just stuck together. So, yeah.
When you put a
I
big
mean,
enough price on it, it's easier.
it is, but you never know what happens. You might get in an accident and be so shocked that you forget your seed phrase.
And lose your coins in a boating accident.
Yes, but that usually happens for other purposes. Um, yeah, so, but also I think I've already heard one of the things that is also very common is not necessarily people hacking into your account, but basically people hacking you. Um, so yeah, can you tell us a bit more about social engineering and maybe what people can do to prevent themselves from happening it to them? And yeah, maybe Luke, you could say a few words since you've been doing a lot of work with IT and cybersecurity.
Yeah, do you know? You ever heard of the thing where you get people that do this for a living? They use social engineering to try hack into people's physical systems, and the biggest weapon they have is a clipboard and a high vis jacket because people just don't question it. And that's the thing you have to watch out for yourself. It's just to avoid complacency and just accepting what you see at face value because it feels familiar. Um, when people, what most people will experience with social engineering is if they get a phone call, somebody claiming to be their bank or something to do. It's usually a total guesswork on the behalf of the scammer, but if they hit on somebody where they sound official enough, they'll start giving out personal information. But I think a lot of people are kind of clued into that now. But what they don't tend to then think about is how that applies online. And the sort of scam that you often, I personally have not fallen for it, but I've had people try it on with me, is that they will, particularly with Facebook, create a fake login page that looks really official. They'll find some way to put that in front of you, and because people are conditioned just to hitting the button to log in, they don't actually question if it's legitimate or not. And when they hit that button, they transfer across their username and password to their account, which then belongs to the scammer, who will then start sending messages out to their connections asking for money. And the good-hearted amongst people will often do that because you just don't question it. It looks official. It looks like the person that you know. And that happens a lot. That happens a lot. And the best way to guard against that is, number one, knowledge is power. Understand that these things happen. So if you get an unexpected email or contact through social media from somebody that you think you know, but the topic's not right, or you're not expecting that to come, question it. No one's going to be upset if you do. Look at where the link's sending you. Look at the information they're after, and just take a beat and ask yourself, why am I getting this, and why do they need it?
I was going to add something there as well. You almost answered my question there. I get a lot of spam emails, phishing, Trust Wallet, MetaMask, come and confirm your account. Your account's going to be deleted. Click here, log in. You never do that. But I think a big clue in these emails, it will come from what looks like, .facebook.com or .ledger or .metamask. But when you actually hover over the button they're asking you to click, the URL comes up and it's some random nonsense in a faraway land. That's always a clue. But never put your seed phrase anywhere. No one ever needs to know it but you.
Yeah, and I mean, they are getting, especially exchanges, it happens a lot that, attackers will just create a website that looks exactly like the exchange's login page. And then they even get you to go through the entire 2FA process, and then they have all they need to take the money out of your exchange account. And usually, the best way to guard against that is, first of all, save the ID from the exchange you actually want to visit and never go there through some link in an email. And also just checking the URL because usually they have some kind of typo in there, like it looks like Binance from the first glance, but it's actually not. It's like Binance with 2i or something like that. So
Yeah,
I've
definitely.
seen quite a lot of those, and there are a lot of quizzes as well one can do to guard against that. But yeah, it's really just being alert all the time because sometimes it's also just timing. I mean, I must admit, I nearly fell for it once, and that was because they caught me in a moment where I was off guard. I was just hanging out with friends and relaxed. So yeah, it's it's quite tough to be
It's so easily done, and
alert.
you don't even realize it's happened until it's too late. That's why it's so insidious. What I was going to say to everyone here is obviously the fact that you're on this call means you're very technically savvy. You're into crypto, and probably what we're talking about doesn't come as news to you. But what I would say is going back into talking about how exchanges and blockchains are putting a lot of money and effort into reaching people that are more normal, not necessarily strictly techie people or all early adopters. They are ripe pickings for these kind of scams. So I would just say, all of you, if there's people in your family that you're putting onto crypto, or within your circle that are starting to ask questions about blockchain, and you know that they're sort of dipping their toe into it, just do them a favor and make them aware of these kinds of scams that are out there, and then they might think twice themselves before they get caught out.
Yeah, and luckily, if you do have a hardware wallet, then you probably are pretty safe. And I think, for me at least, an added benefit is that you're not going to be over trading because it's just too much hassle to even connect. Um, so yeah, one more thing. So there's like different camps. Some think that everybody should be responsible for what they do themselves and everybody should be sovereign. And then there's those that have the view that we as an industry have a responsibility as well. Do you think, yeah, we have this responsibility to help people understand what's going on? And if yes, what can we do?
I
Yeah,
think,
Luke, do you want to start?
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
sure. I mean,
Harry.
I'm sat here literally just advocating for that. Um, I think putting the tools in place to make sure the systems that you put out for people to use are secure is important. Obviously, Minima is about that being as secure as possible. Um, but there's obviously a limit to how far you can go. Ultimately, it is down to personal responsibility, and I think when it comes to what is incumbent on us within the industry or those that interact with us, it's to make sure that all the knowledge is available as easy as possible, and that we try to make the experience as simple as possible, so that when people can get caught out, or someone tries to catch somebody out, it becomes more obvious that it's happening. Because one thing I will say for exchanges, quite often it's a lot. It's a lot for people to deal with when they first come into contact with them, especially if it's new. So it's overwhelming, and I think people more can be done to make it less intimidating and easier to understand. But more broadly, as an industry, making sure that the information is freely available, easily understood, and that can be communicated in an effective way is important.
I think,
Yeah.
sharing the information with everyone around you, helping people wherever you can, just being a good crypto community member to help people learn, learn from your learnings, learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, I think that's very much also the Minima spirit, right?
Yeah.
Collaborating instead of looking at this as a zero-sum game, which some people certainly do, where they think, okay, either I win, or the other person wins. But I think it's more about if we all empower each other, then there's so much more than just a zero-sum game.
Yeah. I mean, Minima is all about cooperation with power, cooperation with the chain. It's about being responsible for yourself, but where everyone's equal and getting on with each other, and we're in a win-win cooperative game rather than a win-lose competitive game. It helps.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so talking about competition, there are different views on how the future of blockchain is going to look like. Some things it's going to be a multi-chain future, which means that projects are going to develop their solution on various different chains. And then if you want to use this project, you can pick the chain you're using. Others think it's going to be cross-chain, which means that we are going to use bridges to bridge from one chain to another. What do you think it's going to be, Barry?
I mean, bridges are great. They serve a great purpose, but they are ultimately a vulnerability. I mean, you look at the wormhole hack that happened recently on Solana. I think it was $85 million were exploited.
Yeah,
And then the company behind Solana just plugged that gap, paid the money. Nothing to see here. all very worrying.
Yeah, I think also they are quite tough to use for people. It's not really a smooth experience if you've ever bridged anything from anywhere to anywhere else. In the end, you always trust the bridge, and some are more set up in a way that it's actually another entity controlling
Yeah.
the bridge, and some are more trustless in a sense, but then you still have to trust that the actual hack to the other chain is working properly.
Yeah. I mean, speaking
Is
to the multi-chain universe, I mean, I think, what we've seen in the last, 5 years in crypto is lots and lots of different projects spring up with lots and lots of different goals to achieve. And, some of them are about privacy, some of them about transactions per second, some are about, lower fees. But many of them have injected these features at the expense of decentralization. And when you sacrifice decentralization, it's a slippery slope. It's very difficult to get back to that completely decentralized network. And as Luke said, you're only as decentralized as your most centralized component. So it is a vulnerability, something to think about. I do think there are going to be more than one chain functioning in the future. I think, total domination by one. I think different chains have got different purposes, and it's all down to the user. What's important for you? What do you want from your crypto? Do you want the censorship resistance through decentralization, or do you want low fees and high transactions per second? And people will choose what they want. When the wheels come off the bus and things start to get hot, and nation states want to close things down, it's only the truly decentralized chains that will survive. That is for sure.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to add, Luke?
I don't think Barry's absolutely right. I think it's always going to end up with more than one chain. I think there's a possibility you might be the one that's used primarily for data transfer, one's used primarily for value. But I think human nature is people always strive to be better and build better. So there's always going to be other things coming along.
Yeah. I mean, what we're trying to do at Minima is to give, trustless, permissionless value and information transfer network to everybody. It doesn't matter if you're, a small farmer in Southern Africa, or you're, a CEO of a German, Fortune 500 company. It's open for everyone, and everyone is equal on Minima, and I think that's commendable.
Yeah, it definitely is, and that's why I think it's going to be one of the chains, even in a multi-chain or cross-chain future, that is going to be around. And I mean, the exciting part about Minima is also that you can have these atomic swaps with other chains, so you don't actually need a bridge if the other chain has the same hashing algorithm. So
yeah, I mean, I think the most exciting thing about Minima is what we don't know. We don't know what people will build on us, just like no one knew what people would build on Ethereum. And anything's possible, and I expect anything and everything to become a reality. We're going to have a really strong ecosystem. Hopefully we'll have the entire world running our nodes, and we'll protect ourselves from the powers that be.
Yeah, speaking of that, so there's the idea of public and private chains, and sometimes enterprise will want to use private chain. Could you quickly share what the differences are, and do you think there are valid use cases for private chains?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the oil industry. I mean, they have a private blockchain that they use to settle their trades with each other. It's probably proof of stake, only a handful of users, but it's secure and immutable and private. Public chains are for everybody, and I think the bigger distinction is more your permissioned versus permissionless. I think permissionless is obviously what everyone wants. You don't want to have to ask for permission to do anything. That's the beauty of Minima.
Yeah, very true. If you want it to be immutable, fully decentralized, transparent, and anonymous and trustless, it's got to be public chain.
But technically, then these companies who build their private blockchains, would they even need blockchain in your opinion?
Well, I mean, Paddy always says there's, the only real value proposition for a blockchain is censorship resistance through decentralization. Everything you can do on a blockchain, you can do 1,000 times more efficiently with a centralized database. But it all depends, what your aims are.
Yeah, definitely. I think companies using private chains, the only real use for it is for it to be, it's basically a way, a proof of custody, effectively, for whether it's transactions or files or whatever. And the only reason I can see for it to be private is just their own kind of worry that any of that would somehow find its way into the public sphere. But if you're using blockchain properly, there's no reason why that should happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe it's also just a good marketing thing sometimes to say you're using blockchain and not just MongoDB.
It's like slapping turbo on the back of a car.
Are you saying that doesn't work?
Sorry, mate.
You should try, and then you can report back. But
no, turbo doesn't. If you give it go faster stripes, it does give you an extra 5 power of science.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what we're seeing now with the rise of the so-called metaverse. You've got all these existing crypto platform, or not even crypto, social platforms who are trying to muscle their way in, and they're going to make their private permissioned walled gardens and hope you're all going to come and play, and they're going to commoditize you again. I mean, I think with Minima, we see, as a full node, a full validating and constructing node, it gives incredible power to the user. My vision of the metaverse, the miniverse, if you will be, self-sovereign digital avatars, i.e. a Minima node, traversing the miniverse, going from one Minima-based platform to another. And these platforms will add value by creating liquidity and bringing like-minded people together, but ultimately you're going to be in charge. You're going to have complete control of your data, complete control of what's seen and what you see, and in a trustless, permissionless way. And I don't think anyone else is going to offer that, because at the moment it's a land grab. They're just trying to sort of change the labelling and swapping the existing overlords for the same overlords.
Yeah, that's true. But now that we're already speaking about data, let's talk maybe a bit about privacy. What does that mean to you, and what do you do to maintain it when interacting online? And Luke, you already said you have a very clear gap between like your online persona and the one that's doing crypto interaction. So how does that look in practice?
It's about well, in practice for me, I have the public facing stuff like this account, for example, that people is very clearly me, and there's lots of places online where I'm very clearly me. But when it comes to things where I want my information to be private or anonymous, then that's where I then have that separate persona. And the reason I do that is just for cleanliness, if nothing else. There's always a chance that if I've got a certain account with a Coinbase, for example, and that got compromised, then at least that's the only thing that's compromised. It's not all my crypto or my entire life. For example, if they can then get into my email and start getting into my fiat stuff. So it's actually very easy to implement, but it's just making sure not to fall into the traps of using like the same passwords or the same secret information. Or the same email accounts. It's just like a online hygiene thing, really.
I think privacy's got another layer to it as well. I mean, I think it's all very well. Everyone knows what they're doing when they log onto a website, when they agree to, terms and conditions. But what people often forget, and what has been brought out with sort of the recent GDPR legislation, is that people deserve the right to be forgotten. I would love to be able to click a button and have all my internet history and cookies and tracking all turned off immediately, all reset, and let them start again. And Minima is going to give you that opportunity. With their true peer-to-peer layer and the new innovations we're bringing in, we're going to have that right to be forgotten. So it doesn't matter who you've interacted with or when you've interacted with them. You can change your public keys and no one will be able to reach you again if that's what you want. And I think that's important.
You saying when I clear my browser history that's not actually getting rid of my
No,
browser
you have to clear it with the turbo button, Luke.
I mean, somebody probably still has it stored somewhere.
Well, I mean, with Minima that won't happen. Once you leave and change your public keys, you'll be gone forever.
Yeah, I mean, it's generally also best practice to have several wallets or change your public address for different transactions. So, because I mean, even though people think Bitcoin is anonymous, I mean, probably in this crowd they know better now.
Pseudonymous.
Yeah, but I think that's a differentiation. At least the media isn't really making a lot.
Okay,
So
the media has not really been the friend of crypto, to be fair.
yes, exactly. But I mean, latest since they found the hackers that have been hacking the pipeline in the US, everybody knows that you can trace Bitcoin. It's not untraceable. So yeah.
Listen, yeah, we got public addresses, public ledger. If at some point your persona, you personally, could be tied to a transaction, then everything you've ever done can be traced. That goes for anything, to be honest.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, so we've also seen that Bitcoin has now been turned into a fundraising tool after other crowdfunding platforms have been halted. What do you make of that? Do you think Bitcoin is a good tool to raise funds?
I think it's a great platform. I mean, it's been funding different movements across the world, not just the Canadian truckers. I mean, to be able to seize GoFundMe accounts at the drop of a hat and bring in emergency measures is a worry. I think as a Bitcoin, because it's trustless and permissionless, just like we are, it is a great vehicle for sharing funds around the world. And I think the more they try and the more the powers that be make these sweeping changes and try and take control, the more it's going to push people towards crypto. So ultimately, it's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I think the only downside at this exact moment in time when they've been trying to do it is the instability, the instability of the price. So you could be buying $100 and then it popping out as $75, but that's the risk.
Yeah, and I think also for Bitcoin, at least, people probably have to rely on wallets that are hosted by other providers or exchanges. So it's if you assume these people are doing it on their mobile, then yeah, there's always some other party involved in
Very true.
what they might be doing, even if it's just a software layer.
I think there's a way of doing it, P2P, eh?
Yeah, so hopefully in the future we will see a lot more activity being fundraised with Minima in all kinds of regards. I mean, I think it also adds potentially a layer of transparency, right? If I give my money to a charity and I like to see what they do with it. Yeah. So we also got some questions from the community. So one of them was, can node runners have something like $50 worth of Minima node running devices where we keep the device online for 24/7 and we get rewards for maintaining it? Any comment on that, Luke?
Yeah, so sounds like we're talking about like a physical device you can plug into at your end into the router and just let it run and do its thing. It's something only recently we discussed, we talked about. It's not immediately on the roadmap at the moment, but that doesn't mean to say that in the future it might not be. I think the idea of having something you can just plug in is great. I think the only thing that we're, to be clear, no decisions have been made at any level. But the one thing for me that potentially makes me think twice about it is just asking people to pay money up front. I mean, that's something that we try not to do. That's why we have the mobile nodes, so people can put it on your Android device and there's no cost to you. But if you're having to run a VPS, obviously that's an ongoing cost, and having something that's a one-off could be attractive. So I suppose all I can release at the moment is it's something that we're thinking about.
Well, I mean, it's something that's available now. Everyone can go out and buy themselves a little Raspberry Pi for $30, $40. Install the Raspberry Pi OS, which is Debian-based, Linux-based, and install the server version, the Minima.jar, plug that into the back of your router, and you're there.
No, that's very good.
Get a fixed IP, and you're a P2P node as well.
If you do want to do that, definitely hit up Barry.
Yeah,
He's going to help
it's
you in the
you
process.
can go 0 to Raspberry Pi in 25 seconds is my fastest.
Okay, so the other question was, do we differentiate the node runners by rewards based on their processing speeds in the future? For example, a $100 phone versus a $1,000 phone.
No. I mean, that's the thing. We know Minima is the plural of minimum, and all the users we do the minimum amount of work to secure the chain, and we aggregate that together. So users they send out a small pulse every now and again, but effectively you're only doing work for your own transactions. So I mean, it doesn't matter if you're running a Kubernetes cluster or an Android 9. You're contributing the same. I mean, I think you could be pumping out extra auto mine on a larger machine on a VPS and add a little bit more work, but that's not how we differentiate a node runner. Just being a node is enough.
Yep, absolutely. Barry says it's not mining in the traditional, no matter what quote unquote hashing power you have, powerful, you are only dealing with your own transactions. Other than that small pulse, and is negligible.
Yeah, which is also what makes it fit on a phone, right? Because if you had to put the entire hashing power you need for a Bitcoin block on there, then
You say that the hash rate from my phone is actually comparable to the hash rate of my PC. I mean, they're so powerful, these computers. What enables us to put it on a phone is their storageless database that never grows. That's the real secret sauce.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin is now 300 gigabytes. Maybe it was
maybe a bit more. I think 400. But I mean, that's that's after 12 years. It's not the end of the world. It's the 83 terabytes a year that ETH2 is going to be pumping out that's a concern.
Yeah, I mean, generally, you just don't want people to have this amount of storage just to access your database.
Well, it's just, if to run an ETH validating node, you need the full unpruned database. I mean, and if you don't want to rely on anyone else, and if you are relying on someone else, then you're relying on someone else.
That's it. And with us, the only information you need to know is that relates to your own transaction. You don't need the entire blockchain.
And also, that's often not really thought about by people, is that one way of censoring a network is also if validators just choose to not include your transactions in the block. And it looks fine from a consensus.
The miners add transactions to the block, not the validators.
Yeah. Depends in which, but in proof of stake networks, for example.
Okay.
But yeah, miners in the case of Bitcoin adding transactions, and if they decide to not add yours, then obviously you can't transact, and that can't happen if you validate and construct yourself. And yeah, I think that's it for today. We've answered all the questions in the community, and to those that have asked really technical questions, we are going to get back to you, but those are really questions that probably our CTO is going to have to answer. And we will give you an answer, just not on this call. And thank you very much for joining us. We will share the recording in a couple of days, so you can listen back to it if there's anything you want to still ask. Feel free to use the Stage Questions channel. It's going to remain open, and we will be online to answer anything there's to be answered.